call the, sorry. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the March 21st Mayor's Leaders Table meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Nicolina Verkar. Today's Mayor's Leaders Table will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. We're not seeing anybody attending electronically, so we're all here. First item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. We have none. Motion for adoption of the agenda. Moved Donna.
Could I add?
Yes. And Mr. Moss wants to add something under other business.
If I may, I'd like to suggest that we add a brief discussion regarding a potential city position of Director of Housing for discussion and just some comments at the table.
Okay. All right. That's the motion with the amendment. Is it seconded? Thank you, Dave. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Dave, seconded Bob. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. So the first item, agenda items, are coordinated strategic planning for Nanaimo ski institutions. And I'm delighted to ask Donna Hayes and then Colin Stansfield, the CEO of the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation. I think this is a very innovative idea, and I'm quite impressed. And if she can simplify it enough that I can understand it, then we'll be good to go.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship.
Please.
Oh, okay, right, I have to be on this. Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the opportunity to present to the group today. You would have seen in your package my very amateur chart that looks like this. I had to learn how to make a chart from my assistant to be able to put that together. And it's by no means where I think we're going to end up. It's just a place to actually start the conversation. So if you were at our meeting last month or read in the minutes, I proposed that this group work on, we talked about it being a charter, but a strategic plan, whatever the wordsmithing people at this table are going to wordsmith it to be, that we work together as a group to put together a proposal that goes before council to support, to do some high-level strategic planning, working with the organizations that are in our community to bring together their strategic plans. I was unaware that many people watch this video of what happens here, but Colin kindly watched what happened and contacted me from the Prosperity Corp, and we've done a little bit of brainstorming together since then about next steps. And then kindly, I shared my concept with the mayor, and we also shared it with Mr. Sims, who has also put together some pieces today. And so this is only a starting point of where I think we can get started from. And so what I did since our last meeting, which was a couple of months ago, is I started asking members of the community who I know and work with all the time, who is Nanaimo? And it was shocking to sit at a table of like 4 to 6 people and everybody just kind of sat there for a minute and nobody had this is who we are, this is what we're about. Then people kind of started talking about different ideas, but nobody could actually specifically say. So yes, we're the harbor city. And I think that's a great tagline to describe our city, but nobody could actually specifically speak to this is who we are and what we're working on as a community. I've heard it said at many meetings that I've sat at recently that, you know, any project that goes forward, that we're going to have to work hard at getting social license and get buy-in from our community. And I know that that will be a part of this at the end when we're done this process I'm suggesting. But I think we have to be able to go to the community and get them to take on and own what we're going to propose. So I can tell you this from my experience with Fair Care. Healthcare is not an easy or uncomplicated. It's a very complex conversation to have with community. But I can tell you that it wasn't very hard to get the community to own that conversation, right? Everybody could relate to healthcare and our lack of access to healthcare and what that looks like. And so that conversation for Fair Care has actually, we've been very lucky in that our social license there has expanded exponentially. We're now doing presentations. I came in Port Alberni next week. I was in Comox. Comox has asked for billboards. We've got another billboard going up in Port Alberni. I was up in Port McNeil. Tofino 2 weeks ago. Like, it's the social license is growing, and getting community buy-in and support for that's going to be an important end part, I think, of this process. So for me, I am not a wordsmith. Okay, so I want to say that up front. I had an interesting experience in January after we had this meeting here. I went to a conference in Hawaii. And it's very interesting and we got a tour of the port of Honolulu, which is doing their largest port project ever historically. They're spending $550 million on port infrastructure right now. So they gave us a tour of that. And we got to meet with the head of their port. And it was interesting to hear them talk about themselves as a hub and to own. I know nobody likes that term, but I've written it here on our chart as a hub. Because that really spoke to me. So everything that comes to Hawaii as a port ships to Honolulu Port, everything. And from Honolulu Port, 30% of it gets spoked out to the other ports on the other islands. And that's how they get all of their food, all of their goods. That's how they get everything. And that's how they import and export. And so I've actually kind of just put, like, once we define who Nanaimo is, what I've said is, you know what, we really are a hub. I think I challenged us at the last meeting to name another municipality in Canada that is not a metropolitan center, so which is not a Vancouver, a Toronto, a Montreal, that has an airport with the potential we have, that has a port authority, remembering there are only 17 in our country, that has a university, that has a tertiary, not a community level, but a tertiary level hospital. Start thinking about those things together. I don't know that I know of another community that actually has those things. We're often compared to Kelowna. Everybody wants to compare us to Kelowna. That's lovely. My first response is they don't have a port authority. And when you start adding those pieces to the conversation, I think what it means for us is that we have huge potential. As chair of the Port Authority Board, I would be the first to tell you that I think the Port of Nanaimo has the greatest potential for growth and impact on the Canadian GDP than any other port in Canada. And it's because we have land on Vancouver Island and other options to grow into manufacturing and marketing and shipping to other countries. And as we particularly have this conversation with the US and what that means to Canada, Nanaimo has huge potential for growth. And so what I'd like to see us do is start bringing these groups in, and I put a little bit of on paper, right? So when I look at the port, I just took a high level view. What is the port about? Well, we're about supply chain. We believe we're the port for Vancouver Island. We also believe we're going to become the port for Western Canada for all goods. And we're about transportation. We're about the movement of people. But when I start looking at those, supply chain means we need to be having a conversation about rail. We're going to invest in a logistics hub. And our logistics hub, when we talk about that, we're going to lead that conversation into food security. So when I look from high-level organization to what community effects are, I'm relating those conversations at the port to the Port Authority and potential opportunities to how does the Port Authority change the conversation on childhood poverty numbers in our central Vancouver Island area. And I think we have some huge opportunities around food security when we talk about our logistics hub. And so that's where I kind of want to look at this as broad picture. It actually kind of ties into the donut philosophy economy that the city has adopted in a lot of ways. And I think there's an opportunity here to look at our infrastructure and our major groups within the city coming together to actually create this comprehensive plan that answers both sides of the equation. I mean, under transportation for us, that means the growth of small to medium enterprises in Nanaimo, because transportation to and from out of the mainland with Hello Ferries, Helijet, both of our seaplane terminals, in over and above a ferry terminal changes the conversation on businesses that can relocate here and grow strong here. And then the small to medium enterprise growth ties directly, and even though I don't have a line here, it ties back into VIU and some of the business programs that I know our CEO has been having with the university about what kind of business programs are offered here to grow our local businesses. We obviously at the port have a direct tie-in through supply chain to the airport. So I've recently had a meeting board to board with the airport authority. They are incredibly excited about this process and want to participate. David said he will be here in a shot to participate. Their master plan has changed dramatically in the last couple of years. and they want to share that, but feel there are some really interconnected pieces that we need to be talking about. They're also involved in transportation. Both of our transportation at the port and airport, trust me, after a board-to-board meeting, drives directly into tourism, which I know we have a new city model, and will grow tourism. I'm excited to say we have 4 cruise ships this year and possibly 10 cruise ships next year. So we got to be talking about tourism. When I talk about the hospital, I've tied that into 2 different pieces. We're a tertiary labeled hospital. What does that mean? We want to be a learning center, which ties directly into VIU. We want to, we have, as our cancer center, I see they've started cutting down trees this week. So as cancer is coming, we want to tie directly into VIU with cancer tech training. We want to actually get the isotope program going forward and come out of Nanaimo, so that 2 of the 5 cancer centers, which will be on Vancouver Island, are actually, the radiation is actually supplied from our university in Nanaimo. We think that's a massive business opportunity for them that would partner with the tertiary hospital. But we're a community hospital. We're the community hospital for the people that live in and around this area, just like the Duncan Hospital is going to be community hospital for the Cowichan Valley, and the Comox Hospital is the Comox area hospital. So we're a community hospital. Well, under community hospitals is the conversation about family doctors. Well, the conversation about family doctors directly ties into a conversation the city's having about the South End Community Center. And there's, as I mentioned to Mr. Sims today, we've been having a conversation about another potential family doctor tie-in. So you can see that all of these things, and if you looked at the chart, all start tying into a global conversation for our community. VIU, I put the early childhood education program because in my conversations with Mark, who sits at our table, I'm so excited what the school district is doing. The school district is doing some innovative partnerships with Island Health through the hospital campus to create the daycare seats I told you probably a year and a half ago was one of our issues for attracting new doctors. We are actually creating a spectacular new program that's going to answer that question. So the school district has completely stepped up. I've met with Robin Gray now. She's the new school district superintendent. She's in. I've talked to her about this process. She wants to be at the table, participate, and see what we can do to leverage our school district and what they're doing with what we're doing as a community, and so they're excited about partnerships. I have spoken to Richard about this, but I think Colin has spoken to Richard more about this. I'd say Richard's in, yep. University's in. Chamber of Commerce, their business programs, they're going to tie directly in through VIU and business programs. Jan Kroll is their incoming chair. Chamber of Commerce is in on this conversation. Super excited about this conversation. I can tell you right now, the Nanaimo Chamber is going to propose policy at the BC Chamber Conference that is being held in Nanaimo this year around the $200 billion that the federal government has promised the provinces on healthcare solutions. And it's coming from Nanaimo Chamber through the BC Chamber. And we've written a fantastic policy around that. So, shockingly, if you tie dollars to population, Central Vancouver Island should be getting $3 billion of healthcare funding of that money that was promised. And so we've written a fabulous policy by bringing some partners together on that. The Chamber is spearheading that, and that's going to be their contribution on the healthcare piece. They're also helping spearhead a continuation of policy on encouraging our Minister of Transportation to have a port-first policy for the province. Right now, Quebec and Ontario have port policies around the importance of ports to economic growth for provinces. BC has number 1 and number 3 in terms of port size for all of Canada, and they have no port policy. And so the Chamber is taking that piece on. So super exciting things happening there. The city, they obviously have a huge role to play in community infrastructure. I know that the South End Community Center is one of their main pieces, and if we look at the pieces that Mr. Sims is going to walk us through today, he's identified several projects that came forward to this group under the Infrastructure Task Force, so Dave will be very familiar with many of those and how they tie back to community. Why is that community piece and the South End Community Center important? They're signing MOUs with groups like the Family Division to have a family practice there, where we see what they're doing in Colwood. I'm currently in a conversation in Qualicum, and this is about a role that municipalities play in helping provide access to family doctors in their community. super excited about the South End community and all the other pieces that it brings. Healthcare is just one way it ties in. But they're also responsible for fire and safety. I listed it as fire and safety because that's terminology from my construction background. But that ties into the SPO and the housing conversation. SFN, I just put new businesses and healthcare on there because when I meet with SFN, they are working on so many great projects. So I don't want to identify them without Erilyn and Chief being at the table and telling us what they believe our focus is. I can tell you I had a meeting, a 3-hour meeting with them on Monday. It's exciting. Some of the stuff they're doing is so incredibly exciting and what they're going to bring to community. And Erilyn sits on this task force, and I did chat with her a brief amount about this, but getting them involved in that process. They are already at the healthcare ecosystem table, which sits above Fair Care. So they're already helping us with the healthcare conversation. And I can tell you that their input there is going to be very impactful, that when we do see a tower developed here, it's going to be different than you see in other communities because First Nations are going to be at the table in that conversation. School district, as I said, they're working with Health Authority right now on a daycare program. What I'm really excited about is their solutions also involve dual credit training through the school district and through the university. We're talking about early childhood education programs and getting those people getting students in grade 11 and 12 into working in daycares that are this partnership with the Health Authority, like just really creative out-of-the-box solutions you don't see anywhere else. So we've already started those conversations. I listed not-for-profits on here and tied back to SPO, but I'm really looking to the expertise at this table because there is a lot of expertise here that will give direction on that. And I listed arts and culture because that is a group that is also doing some big things. My concern about those two groups is that in and of themselves, they are made up of this many organizations. And we need to somehow get this many organizations to have this voice that is representative of their total voice. And I don't know how to do that. All of these other groups that I mentioned here, I'm actively working with them. The last two not-for-profits, although SPO has contacted me about moving forward, and I think they want to be part of a conversation. Arts and culture, I do have a bit of, Carolyn was on our infrastructure, so I know a little bit about what the art gallery is doing and some of those things. We need to sort out at this table how those groups become, like what the voice is and how they're managed, and then we can tie them back in. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just me sitting down at my desk going, hey, I'm involved in all these groups. Here's the connected pieces I see. I'm hoping this table can grow what this looks like because I'm obviously missing some components and I'd be looking to this group to go through that. One of the things that does come up is that this is a big process to have all of these groups in one room talking at a very high level to get agreement on what it looks like. And so I was very excited to hear from Colin. I do hear lots about what's going on at the Prosperity Corp because the Port Authority sits there and because some of my health people sit there. So I hear from multiple people already what happens there. But I've also participated in some of the events through the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance, which I appreciate being invited to. But when Colin contacted me, like how do we implement this process? So, and then once we implement it, how does it tie back into the city's plan? Like when we did the infrastructure piece, you know how we labeled everything to go into the city plan so that it's a complete piece. And that's kind of where Mr. Sims is coming in. I think that's really important that we're tying it all together. My hopes for next steps is that through this group, we see what I've missed, tie a few more pieces together. We take a motion to council to get their unanimous support on this process. And our proposal has to be complete. Like, how are we funding the process? That's where Colin comes in and he's going to present next and tell you how we might do that. And then this process would be handed over to someone like Prosperity Corp to run with us in attendance and being part of it. The process to come together and with city staff being part of that, for then that process and results to come back to us for formulation into what I'm hoping is really, and I'm going to call it a strategic plan only because I'm in business and that's what the word we use, but whatever the charter or whatever we're going to call it, to come back with what that looks like and then steps for implementation. How are we actually implementing and creating those strategic parts? Like, what does that look like? How are we doing that? right? Is that a task force working on certain pieces? Is that us engaging the province in certain conversations or the federal government in some cases? I don't know what that looks like yet. But I do know that we need something. And I do also know that historically, this is the time. There is a massive opportunity right now. And I, for one, at the various tables I sit at, we don't want to miss it. We recognize at the Port Authority, at the healthcare, all the healthcare groups that I'm part of, we recognize there is a huge opportunity right now, particularly with some of the stuff that's going on in the States. Some of the growth opportunities here, I think, are much larger than we could actually imagine until we start sitting at some of those tables. I don't want to miss this opportunity. And I think it's a great time for us to get buy-in and grow stronger. We've seen this surge with the US opposing Canada of nationalism, of people saying, I'm proudly Canadian. I want people that live here to say, I'm proudly from Nanaimo. And this is who we are, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're growing. So this was my concept plan. I put a little bit more work into it since we met last. I'm happy to answer questions now before I pass it over to Colin to talk about like what are next steps and how does it get funded, the work.
And that, folks, is why I love Donna Hayes. Dave.
Well, some great thoughts, Donna, some great thoughts. So I'm a great believer in looking at what others do. All of my planning, urban design stuff has always been about traveling, looking, asking, and basically where things have been proved out. So the charter idea was actually something I mentioned, I don't know, a few meetings ago, that I thought a charter was the way to go. And I based that on 2018, I spent a fair bit of time in Europe visiting 5 cities that are absolutely noted to be top of game, right, for all of these kinds of things. And one, Freiburg, built their future around the notion of a charter. And a charter is a bit, so a charter, and what they did was it empowers action. It's an empowering document. So it's not a strat plan per se, because I think what happens is when we do planning, it's like the OCP. I mean, it's a strong document, but it sits like this. It frames the city. It's a very good document. But the cities that have been really, really successful in bringing everything together, in signing off, like the charter of Freiburg has all of those equivalent organizations signing off on it. Like there's 20 or 30 signatures, I don't know. And so it's like, if I remember, it might be, I don't know, 5-6 pages or something. And it just, this is who we are. This is what we want to be. We declare this is who we are. We declare this is where we want to be. Sign. And you know what? Absolutely powerful document. Powerful. When I went there, I'd never heard about it. I met with their director of planning. We had a great time together. Wolf Dosking is his name. Google him, super famous planner in Europe. He's retired now. But anyway, he said, Dave, it's about the charter first. You got to start at the beginning. The beginning is the charter. And then everything fell from there. And all their planning work, their economic development work, like if you've ever been to Freiburg, right, blows you away, right? Yeah. And so that's the notion of a charter. I love this. The world is this, right? And where it's not this, then it just doesn't function the way it can. So good on you to cast this in this light. So full on endorse. And then in really important documents like the OCP fit in then too. Like there's a stronger place for that because it's another solid brick. Well, not a brick, a building stone, right? And all these building stones come together to create a foundation that you run with it. And so good on you for that. I think I've got a thought on a couple of organizations that could be added to it, but I can do that later. Anyway, just my thoughts at the front end, just excellent stuff. Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. Before I ask Don to respond, I just want to welcome Councillor Joseph this morning. Hope you were able to hear some of that. I was too busy listening to Don to look up at the screen to see how long you've been on, so my apologies, but welcome. And you're muted, by the way. In any event, Donna, we'll let you respond, please.
I'm excited about the charter idea. So part of our maybe overall working, because I think we have to create a working plan, how we're going to get there, which Colin's going to help us with. What I'm hearing you say is we're going to end up with a charter that after we start doing when we're done this work, everybody's going to sign on and say, and I love that because that is something, you know, you move to Nanaimo or you're a business starting in Nanaimo, we're like, look what we got, this is who we are, right? I really believe that that will help give, I mean, I've seen actually all of the Prosperity Corp's documents. I love your strat plan. I love all that stuff, looks great. But it would also give this very tangible, you need to go source this kind of business because it's going to tie into this. But we're going to leverage it against, this is who we know is here, who can help bring those people here, right? So I think that's brilliant. My question to you is, can you get us a sample document of that? Like a sample of one that you've seen that you think really works? I'd love to see it. Okay, so if you could share, can you share that with all of us that's on, at this table?
Well, I'll find it. I hope I still have it. If not, I can access it.
Okay, if you could, and then share it, that would be great. I see that kind of as maybe the end, so we should add that to our work plan, that we're gonna end up with this charter, everybody's gonna be asked to sign it, and then that's gonna be like what we're gonna publish. I love it.
Anyone else before we go to Colin Stansfield? Mr. Stansfield, good morning. We'll call you Colin. I think I'm feeling informal this morning.
There we go.
After
Wonderful.
all, it's spring break and the kids are off all, so what the heck.
Well, thank you, and I'm pleased to be here. I think Donna has covered so much of that, and so I'll try not to repeat anything. But what stands out first when I was listening is that sort of connection, and I'm pleased to see Councillor Thomas here, but that notion of that Snuneymuxw Snaewelth worldview, that everything is connected. I mean, that's how we understand things these days, and so seeing it laid out in a diagram, hearing about it in conversations, that is the way to pursue these opportunities. From an NPC perspective, yes, I mean, maybe I'm the only geek sitting at home on December 13th watching a Mayor's Leaders Table, but it's because we look to tables like this to provide us that direction. I mean, that's why we were created. And so an opportunity then to be able to come up with some of those elements that we've heard need to be updated or may have been lacking, that notion of what is our unified vision? How do we turn that then into very compelling storytelling that a community can rally around? That also has in it an investable future that one can take to higher orders of government who always tell us, if you show up with the big picture, we'll be prepared to show up with the whole of government response. The notion of resource optimization, at times when we're facing such significant challenge, but also such significant opportunity, how do we make sure that we are leveraging the initiatives that exist? Then also that notion of enhanced competitiveness, that Nanaimo is a place that is doing exactly what Bob's shirt tells us to do. And that's important. And so reached out to Donna and said, we have the capacity to be able to assist with this. That's why NPC exists. We not only have internal capacity, we have some external support as well. And so let us take on the homework, because it also wasn't lost on me at that meeting that you gave your great impassioned speech, and then what next? Who takes it and who can run with it? And I think that NPC is the perfect place to do that. With respect to the notion of a charter and how it connects into, I think a charter is fantastic. It does answer that question of what are we doing and why. It provides you with those guiding principles. It is then what guides you into crafting a strategy, and a strategy that, you're right, absolutely has to then land in an implementation plan and be carried forward. And so to take all of those pieces together in a moment, I think is the task at hand. Why acting now? The growth opportunities, the economic resilience that you've talked about as we're facing what looks to be uncertain times for the foreseeable future, the ability to have everyone aligned makes perfect sense. And you talked about the donut. Absolutely, underneath all of this, beyond just economic prosperity, is that notion of community well-being. How are we making sure that we're looking after our citizens, not just here in Nanaimo, but across the Mid-Island? And so to take something that has, as complex as everything being connected and trying to engage in that style of planning, there is this notion then of taking a living systems approach to planning, recognizing that all things are connected and that for the port to succeed, they need to make sure that there is also community well-being. For the hospital to do well, they're going to need certain things from VIU, everything that you've already mentioned, Donna. And so there is a process that we can run through to get that done. It revolves around systems thinking, it incorporates real-time and on-demand. Because we talk about having a charter, I think the other piece that's really important is that it's perpetual, it's ongoing. It's not a let's do this process once in 2025 and then have to revisit it in 2030. It's that those answers are sitting in front of you. You're collecting the data and you're ready to go at any given point. That it shares prosperity through those common value frameworks, that we think about prosperity goals, the local feedback loops, circular economy, But then networked governance, and I think that's a piece that, again, ties into NPC. I think that the brilliance that came in putting together the Prosperity Corporation is that it wasn't just the city pursuing economic development alone. It was doing that through partnership with the nation, with the port, with the airport, with VIU and the Chamber of Commerce, to build that in and to then be able to expand it. And to make sure that it is a learning process, that it is continually being updated, because things are going to be shifting as we go along. And as someone who's just arrived and gets handed a tremendous city plan, but also an economic development strategy that is only 4-5 years old, things change continually. So how do you make sure that you're updating it by having those partners around the table? And so submitted some material with just a very brief background on what a living systems approach to planning is. And I'm really just here today to say that I absolutely, on behalf of NPC, welcome any opportunity to take on this work, to support this table, that we have the capacity, and I think that we were created to do just that. And so would welcome that opportunity.
So Donna, fabulous idea. Thank you for pulling that together. And Colin, thanks for the support on that. I think you're absolutely right, Donna. This is an excellent time for us to be pushing ahead. It's important that we capitalize on the opportunity now. And it kind of harkens back to the big ask of years ago when, as a group, we approached the provincial government to provide funding, but it was a coordinated effort. And I think going forward, if we can provide coordinated efforts to all levels of government, higher levels of government, that will be a beneficial thing. So I totally support the initiative. I think it's a wonderful idea.
Anyone else? And if I may, I mean, and when we talk about all levels of government, it's also, I mean, obviously, SFN's involvement, crucial, but highlighting that this is a place to do business for a whole series of reasons. It's not just because people are living here, it's because it's an accommodating, welcoming community that has a lot of potential and has things in place already. And you know, I'm mindful of the line, to everything there is a season, and I think Don is absolutely bang on. This is the season. There's a, what is it, that there's a Chinese symbol or saying or something about mixing disaster and opportunity or whatever. So somebody's brighter around this table than I will remember what exactly it is, but when there is this kind of crisis, that is also a time of opportunity. It's something to that effect, and someone will figure it out and find it or Google it. Maybe Bill knows it, but I think that kind of sums up my view of where we're at. We have a real opportunity here with the Prosperity Corporation in place, and the role of all of the groups, organizations that are mentioned in the schematic drawing. I'm feeling quite chuffed, as the English would say. Quite chuffed. If nothing further from anyone else, shall we go on to Mr. Sims? Erilyn, you're okay? Erilyn, I think that has some, if it's like the RDN, it has something to do with your headset. And there may be a switch on that. I'm looking around the room for younger, brighter, more technically oriented folks than myself, but that may explain why when you talk, we can't hear you. I was going to say your lips moving reminds me of a very bad old joke about a sentencing in an English court, but So, Callista, you're the youngest here. What do you think it is? Oh, gone again.
She might be trying to reconnect different.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that if she wants to, Erilyn wants to say something, she has an opportunity to do it.
changing a lot of those things that, wireless mics on.
There's a thumbs up, Erilyn. You're okay, but you can hear us, but,
Yes, I can hear you.
oh, yay! More importantly,
Oh,
we
there
can,
you go.
we can hear you.
Way to go, Mr. Sims. I assume that was you.
Yes, yes.
Nice. No, good morning, everybody. This is a great conversation. There's a lot of dialogue with Snuneymuxw, with others in our community, like the Port Authority, the city, and others that can easily lean into this kind of initiative and that are underway. So I think this is to tell the story of Nanaimo, the Mid-Island region, and our shared histories in a positive light, I think is a good, valuable initiative. The only thing I would add in here, technically speaking, is the addition of Petroglyph Development Group. I think there's a lot of things there that we are working out towards with transportation, trade, tourism, hospitality, and other sectors. So with the addition of that to this outline, I think we have a good start. And, I just want to take a moment to thank you, Mayor, for your leadership at our facilitation table with Muni and Murr and Snuneymuxw. We're really making some progress there, and continuing a principled approach, I think we'll be able to get somewhere pretty quickly here. So it's been a while since I've been here, but just wanted to say thank you, Mayor, and for your leadership. So don't let me hold anything else up. I look forward to the rest of the agenda.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Mr. Sims for his technological wizardry, or Callista, or whoever managed to make it happen. For a guy who can't even FaceTime on his phone, I'm always impressed by anyone who can do anything. Mr. Sims, over to you, please. Review and discussion of Mid-Island Strategic Vision / Charter.
Thanks, Your Worship. It was along the same sort of spirit that Donna approached it, which was, I thought, well, we have to have something to chew on, and that's all this really is something to chew on and kick at. And given your previous conversation, maybe pages 11 through 17 or whatever are moot, and you can just shred them and forget about them. But it's really about food for thought. So I'll just describe a little bit about the process we went through. We just grabbed some of the organizations that we had talked about at the last meeting: the city, Snuneymuxw, the port, BIU, the airport, the Fair Care Alliance, the Hospital Foundation, the school districts, Prosperity Corporation. So just grabbed the forward-facing documents, not sort of intending to translate, but what was publicly available information, because it was a simple means of pulling together what was publicly faced up for each of the organizations, and just put all of those as summaries in the first few pages. So that's pages 11 to 15 on your agenda. So the purpose of that was just to provide the background, and then tried to throw some common themes, which is on page 16, and the common themes are that we see amongst all of the organizations: sustainability and environmental responsibility, community well-being and inclusivity, economic development and innovation, collaboration and partnerships, reconciliation and cultural respect are the sort of 5 themes that emerged from all of the various. So it's along the lines of what you're saying, and I'm always struck, particularly since we started the Reimagine Nanaimo process, by the coherence between what we hear from the community, what we hear from our leadership, which is our council, what we hear from community leaders such as yourselves, the coherence, and we're already unified, which is fantastic. I think I mentioned last time the city plan had 10,000 plus inputs. That's just, sort of over the top as far as community input on a strategic or a community planning exercise. And so that coherence is already there, and we don't need to reinvent that, I think. So that's a really big positive. So that's what page 16 looks at, and there's a few samples from each of the parties that, we selected, just saying how they sort of fit in underneath that common theme. And the last page is a bit of a word salad of a standard mission statement, and I tend to be a little cynical about mission statements if I'm honest, but because you can say nice things and they're not saying anything at all. But nevertheless, it's still the intention is behind it, so I think that's the important thing. And then the very last little bit is just a reflection or a reminder of what the city plan goals are. Again, speaking to that coherence, taking all of the common themes that we saw with all the organizations, aligning very closely with the city plan's goals. So it's kind of cool. And I just kind of threw that together for the committees, be able to throw darts at, and if it's of no value, then it's of no value. And that's no offense taken. Thanks, Your Worship.
Donna, please. Thanks, Bill.
I appreciate Bill's comments, but I want to say, Bill, this has huge relevance. And I really appreciate you putting this piece together, because I think we all know this is our third session of the Mayor's Leaders Table, which may seem disconnected. We originally came together because of COVID, because we were in crisis. And we wanted to know how our businesses were going to survive that, and how could we unify and work together to do that. And then as COVID we went through COVID as a community, and then we came through to, we're like, hey, you know what, we need to, as Reimagine was happening, we need to diversify and grow the group and get more engaged out with community. And we came, from an infrastructure perspective, we came together with our 26 key core projects. And Mr. Sims sat on that table with us, and engaging the youth was one of our topics, and the donut economy another, for us to understand it better. And now we're at this table, which I feel is the implementation stage of all of those things happening. I think the Reimagine document is an amazing document. What I love about it is that it was truly a community document, right? We hear over 10,000 people, that's unheard of here. 10,000 people were engaged. So we already know that document has community and social license. It's accepted by the community. Now it's about implementing all the things that we have spent the last 4 or 5 years working on, and all of these pieces that come together to tie them together with the city's, what their overall plan or document is, to tie it all together with a process that truly just brings us all together. And we end up with a charter that's a working, living, breathing document that is growing us. I suspect we're going to end up with some kind of definition of who Nanaimo, the harbor city, gateway to economic growth and opportunity, or something like that then we tell you how you get there, whatever we're going to label ourselves as. I want to say that I appreciate you putting this together, Bill, because this is the piece that ties all of those years of work together with our Reimagine plan. And so I think this is a very critical piece of work that has to be part of this process. So thank you for doing that and bringing that together.
Dave, please. Thank you.
Yeah, Bill, I found it very, very helpful. I think my only suggestion is I'd stay away from the last part, describing a mission and putting words there, right? I think it's better not have that blank right now, because I think people will see that, it's already decided, right? So that's my only comment. But the summarization, going through those documents, very, very helpful. As an input into a conversation about what a charter looks like. That's the kind of work that needs to be done. And there's other documents out there likewise that need to be synthesized and bring it together. And some Colin, it's great you're offering to assist in pulling that together. But a really important piece. So thanks. And what really warms my heart? A director of engineering just talking planning like that is just
Good job, Bill.
I'm not sure what to say now. That was very good.
That was coming from an architect and a planner.
Yeah. I high praise indeed. All right, in terms of next steps, Donna, please.
What I would ask of this table, it sounds like, I don't want to presume, but, and we can, however this table does it, if it's a vote or whatever it is, that we're approving the process moving forward, kind of how I outlined, with the end goal being what we talked about. I think next steps is for us, this chart is not complete, right? And I think I said it up front, like, we need some serious help around how are we going to structure the not-for-profit and arts and cultures conversation. I need this table to help figure that piece out. I appreciate Erilyn mentioning Petroglyph Development Group, but maybe Erilyn can go back and then working on the chart, Erilyn, come and make some of these other connected. You guys are doing so much. The nation is doing so much right now. But the pieces that you can add to this, I would ask if you could take a look at it and send those comments. So if we could maybe focus on filling out this chart, if we're approving the plan, working with the Prosperity Corporation and tying back to City Master Plan, then we have something after our next meeting to physically take to council and say, we want to know that City Council is 100% behind this. This is the process that we're going to take on. And then once we have that support, that motion, that direction, we can go to Prosperity Corp, who Colin will be working behind the scenes, I'm sure, to say, these are next steps. This is who we're going to engage. This is how we're going to move forward with that process and give us a little bit of a high-level view of what does that look like. But this chart is not 100. This is just me putting thoughts on paper. I need this group to help fill in the areas and how do we address some of those groups.
And for practical purposes, because at the end of the day, somebody has to put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard or whatever the world does now. Where does it go? Who does it go to? Does it come back to your desk? I don't think so. Does it go to Colin's desk? Does it go to Bill Sims' desk? Where literally, the input that you're talking about, where does it go? And who's going to synthesize it and put it? Bob?
Just a couple thoughts. I mean, it strikes me that Prosperity is a perfect place for this to land and to help get to the next step. But one question for you, Colin, is what additional resources might you need to get there, or do you have capacity currently?
So we do have the capacity to do this first step, to get us to that first gate, and likely to take it beyond there as well, but certainly to get us to that next meeting, filling out this table and drawing up the plan of what would come next. Absolutely.
That'd be great. And the other thing I wanted to mention is Dave's comment about the charter at Freiburg. I mean, maybe there's some other examples of charters that we can find worldwide. You got me intrigued now to do a little searching, but maybe collectively we can do some searching and compare notes, because I completely agree it's worth seeing what other organizations and communities in the world have done. Thank you.
I can take that on if you want.
Thank you, that would be great. How big is Freiburg, by the way, population-wise?
Similar to us.
Okay.
I think it's about 140.
Okay. All right. Do we need Ms. Vakar, I'm looking at you, maybe a motion? Just to clarify what we're doing, or?
Yes, thank.
Ms. Dave, please.
Just a question in terms.
Should go green.
A question in terms of other suggestions of organizations. Do that offline, just send you something?
I would ask that you send them to me, and then I'll copy Colin on that. I just think that the one thing I would like this group to have that conversation, since it is coming from the mayor's leaders table through to Prosperity. So if when you send the email, could you please copy
Sure.
all of us that sit at this table? I know Richard and Mark aren't here today, but make sure that we're all copied, so that if we have comments that we feel
Good.
that we need to put in,
I'll do
we put that in,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll copy our final comments over to Colin.
Excellent.
Good. Ms. Vakar,
Thank you, Your Worship. So earlier on in discussion, what I heard was a desire to have an endorsement from council. So a potential motion, just a suggestion based on everything that's been discussed, could be that the Mayor's Leaders Table recommend to council to endorse establishment of a Mid-Island Strategic Vision Charter in alignment with a city plan to be led by the SPO and focusing on the following themes, and then listing the themes that were included in a document provided by Mr. Sims for this meeting. So that's one possibility.
I like that. I'm going to suggest we not do it this morning, but that would hopefully be the aim of the next meeting, to be in a position to do that.
I don't think it's the SPO,
NPC.
it's NPC.
Thank you for the clarification.
So I would
Donna.
like to say, I think that's a great idea. If we're all prepared to make that motion in our May meeting, meaning we've done this, we've done the work, and so that, because when we present to council, I would like to give them as much information as we can of what this kind of looks like, so that if we go make a presentation to support our motion, it's very comprehensive.
Dave?
So I just, one of the things I think, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. And I think, great work, Bill, but I think it's kind of going down the road a little too far right now, based on charters as I understand them. So it's an input, but I wouldn't have that as part of the motion right now. We're just exploring the idea of a charter, and the framework as you described it, for me, would seem to be the first motion. And then we start digging a little deeper with that kind of input to further paint the picture that we need painted.
You know Ardonna, she's a bit of a racehorse.
I am, because my next comment is, I'd like to put timeframes around this.
Yeah.
So, and I'd need to talk to Colin about what's realistic, but I would like to end 2025 with a solid charter, that we have some kind of big ceremony that we're all signing. So I know it's, April in a week and a half. I mean, the year is racing through, but I would like to see this done by the end of 2025.
Dave?
I would say that that's quite doable, because in fact, as you've identified, and Bill's also pointed, it's a matter of getting the collective together to agree and then sign off. Yeah.
Good. I mean, I'm satisfied that I think we've got a pretty good idea where we're going. Maybe a little slower than Donna might like, but let's put it this way, all careful steps without tripping, but we know where we want to end up by the end of the year without question. Okay.
Great stuff.
Thank you for the draft motion. All right. Mr. Moss?
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to start out by referencing a quote that I saw in the Globe this morning, and it goes like this. Our Prime Minister, currently, Mr. Carney, alluding to the current trade war with the United States, said, "The nature of time is that Canada needs to do things that have not been imagined or thought possible at a speed we haven't seen before." And that captured my attention, and I believe it is so true, and it plays exactly into, Donna, what you were describing. So I found that worth repeating. So, but what I wanted to talk about, though, is how we move forward with our housing challenge. And when we talk about community resilience and growth, which are absolutely things that we want to achieve, it is underpinned by making sure that we have our housing issues addressed in our community. And a few of us have been pondering how best to try and move that forward a little faster, because we're still losing ground on our housing issues. And when I say housing, it's kind of three parts. I mean, obviously the shelter housing for those that are unhoused, supporting affordable and workforce housing, and making sure that we've got enough housing units to support our growing workforce. Because if we are going to grow our economy, we need places for people to live. So it's you know, it's my belief, and I think it's shared by many others, is that we need to, even though other levels of government are involved in this whole decision, we need to take the lead as a community to make things happen. And one of the ways of doing that, and what we're suggesting, is maybe we establish a new senior position at the City of Nanaimo, which we, for argument's sake, are calling the Director of Housing. This is somebody who would, first of all, understand the housing needs and you know, the research that's been done and the current situation. But most importantly, drive forward the programs to deal with those challenges. And so it would be about identifying specific projects that we need to move forward on, helping, I'm going to say lobby, but maybe address would be a better term, lobby various levels of government to make sure that we get the support, understanding what we need to do to get to the next step, and working with community members that are involved in those various things. There's lots of nonprofits out there. But the key piece here is that this position would drive forward. It's not about planning. It's not about you know, creating policy. It's about pushing forward the agenda. And in my thought, you know, this would be a position that directly reported to our CAO. It would be a lean and mean department, primarily focused around, you know, the one director and maybe one or two support staff. But that person would report to council on a regular basis to talk about the actual progress that's being made on all of these issues. So that's not necessarily an easy person to find, but I also believe that if we set that position up appropriately, it might intrigue people that have got the skills and desire to make it happen. We'd have to give them the license to move forward, but if we did that, I think it might intrigue a number of people. So I throw that out there just for discussion at the table. I think obviously there's lots of work that needs to be done to get there, but in concept, what are your thoughts?
If I may, I'm going to jump in because Bob met with Dale Lindsay, our CEO, and myself to talk about this in a general way. To some extent, I think this work is being done by our senior staff already. It's not labeled per se, but it's equivalent to the same thing. And one of the suggestions I made when we met last time was to wait to see what the mandate letters for the ministers were, because it was early on in quote unquote the recently re-elected provincial government, and also see what was in the budget. And that, as you know, takes time for the money to flow down and figure out who gets what and how much and where and when. I mean, only big items get reported in the budget, and then the nitty-gritty, so to speak, the granular stuff filters down to various organizations. Let me just give my reaction. I'd be concerned about asking the city, because it will be the city who'll be paying for it, to create another position or more positions, when I can tell you certainly we hear it at the RDN, and by we I mean local politicians. There is a growing sort of tax revolt out there, and a resentment of further government spending on things that people may or may not see as important. I'm not saying no to the concept by any stretch, but I would want to look at it carefully and for us to understand, and I think, and that's one of the purposes of letting Bob bring this forward this morning, is for us to brainstorm a bit as to what that might look like. What is it going to be? For instance, I'm looking at Dave this morning, and we're getting lots of correspondence around the fencing at the new hearth site in the south end on Victoria, on the far end of Victoria Road. I mean this as sort of a cheeky way. I mean, Dave's often abroad and traveling, so I'm not sure whether he knows that, you know, we've got 2 new sites that are going to be up and running fairly soon with a substantive number of beds. It's a big step forward, and it's a kind of pressure that his columns and various people in the community have brought to bear on the government that has seen that come to fruition, and you know, the support and agreement of the city. That's one aspect of the housing. Donna mentioned this morning, I mean, attracting the kind of talent we need in the medical community, having the appropriate childcare facilities in place. Given the, there's certainly a drop in the number of building permits that are being issued. I mean, I get the statistics every month, and there's no question that it's a time of uncertainty. There's a piece in the Vancouver Sun this morning around the housing policy, one of the policies that looks like the government's going to abandon in terms of an incentive to build secondary suites because it hasn't had the uptake it needed to create secondary suites, because landlords have said, well, unless we can get rid of, difficult tenants and deal with that, we're not really interested in just creating another opportunity for a headache because it's not seen as an opportunity to make money and get a return on capital. So there's a number of things at play right now in the marketplace, let alone the government's efforts around housing, or what I'll call subsidized housing. I mean, we know that in Europe, much of the housing in any given community is in fact government housing in a sense. It's either subsidized, owned, low rent, can be passed on, dealt with differently than the way we normally think of it in this country. But it's a recognition that in a market economy, there will always be a portion, and what that portion is, who knows, of your society who will not be able to afford what most people would agree is reasonably priced housing that meets their needs, their families' needs. And we're trying to make up to some extent for, very deliberate policy meant to balance a budget at the federal level back in the early 90s. I mean, Paul Martin was a hero for getting to a balanced budget after many years of profligate spending by both the Trudeau administration and the Mulroney government as well over time. I won't blame Joe Clark. He only had 9 or 10 months to do it. He had a very small role in it. But that's a reality, and we're not there yet, and it's going to take some time. So it's a big, complex issue. But and don't let my comments this morning, as I've jumped in, stop anyone from seeing exactly what springs to their mind in terms of response to the concept of what Bob has raised, which is the Director of Housing. It may well be one of the brightest ideas that's come forward in terms of pulling it together. It's rather like what we've been discussing most of the morning. Big picture, everybody involved, fairly clear tasks, strategic plan, vision, etc., enumerated. People understand what it is, represents the community's needs and hopes and dreams. So I throw it out there. Dave, you were going to jump in first, I think.
Thank you. Generally my thoughts around this issue. I think that, and it's been 40 years. 86 was the year when we stopped building federally. And Chrétien, actually, interesting enough, was the one that pulled out the final stops in terms of support. So, it's all political stripes, it was the nature of the beast at that time. And 40 years later, we're paying a price. And it's not, the challenge, I think, relates to very much this notion of a charter and economic development. It's not just about addressing homelessness. This is about, if you don't have housing, you're not going to be building anything. You're not going to have a strong economy because you're not going to be able to attract people. The cost of housing is one thing. The other is just availability, right, and types of housing. So it's absolutely fundamental to the well-being of society. If you don't have housing, you're toast. And you can dream all you want, but if you don't have the housing infrastructure necessary to accommodate the broad needs of a community, then a lot of everything else is wishful thinking. So the notion of Bob's notion of somebody who's absolutely full-on, totally focused on looking at housing in a way we've never looked at it. Now, notwithstanding the fact that we can say, well, we need the province in the lead, we need the feds in the lead. Well, the feds are throwing money at it now. And how do we access that money? And, I wrote a document, presented it a year ago, identifying, 17 ways we could, recommendations on how we might address all of this. On reflection, based on what I understand in the work that I'm doing and what I observe when I travel, because I do a lot of that and I meet with people. In the absence of somebody who's been tapped to absolutely focus on this with all their energy and their wisdom, then we will be like a dog chasing its tail. We'll be doing more of what we've done. And, and the city's been doing some good work, and I've talked about that. But this is such an enormous crisis that it's not getting any better. We need to look at it differently. And I mean, the city needs to determine whether it has the financial resources, the ability to maybe redirect some financial resources to do this. But in the absence of a full-on focused initiative that drives this in a way that we've never seen driven, and I'll go back to that wonderful quote, because that quote applies to what we're talking about here, I think. Maybe today we can't endorse that idea because there's more we need to think about. But I think we need to endorse the idea of let's see how we can make that work. Let's see how we can make a director of housing work for the city so it gives us a leg up and gives us a competitive advantage to other cities that haven't figured that yet, because they're going to figure it out. It's who's going to be there at the front end to be able to do it and be the example. Thank you.
Donna, please. Thanks, Dave.
So I'm probably looking at this from a different perspective because I will put on my developer's hat for this conversation, and then I want to talk about the process that we've been talking about today. So I think this is a brilliant idea. What I don't know is if it's a city-funded position, or maybe we can get some money from the province to create a unique program where we have a director of housing. I just don't know how that's funded, because I do agree with the mayor. I am hearing it everywhere we go. Cost of living, taxes. I mean, trust me, the whole conversation that's just happened at the Regional District Hospital Board around monies for hospitals and what's happening there is making me very keenly aware of where taxpayers are right now and very almost hypersensitive to what that conversation looks like. So maybe there's a unique way we can craft the funding of that position, but I do agree that I think that is a strategic position that we as a municipality could set ourselves apart from in creating something unique there. But here's why I think it's needed. One of the things that has played a part in my wanting to move forward with the strategic planning piece is a comment that was made about what our groceries cost. So I know this is coming from a really weird place. I don't feel that I, as a business person, can change what groceries cost to feed the people who live here. And there are a lot of people going hungry here. And so I feel helpless when I think about that. But there is actually something that I can change. And what I think we as a group can change is what the average income of households in our community make. So when you look at building affordable housing as a builder, if I look at building affordable housing and I want to tap into CMHC, the average mean income per household in Nanaimo is from 2019, which is like archaic, but from 2019, that's the statistics they use, and it's $41,000 that are supposed to feed you and your children, and so the thing that I think we can change as a community by doing processes like this is I think we can change what that mean income number is substantially by creating impactful jobs in our community. So when I say I'm looking at it from a different perspective, the first thing that comes to mind, and if I'm going to put my port hat on now, I'm thinking, okay, we've got some huge opportunities here, but I can't bring people here if there's nowhere for them to live, right? So that's where I'm saying this process has all these tiebacks, how everything is related to each other, and so. The reason I say, maybe it's a position, like I don't want to raise the people who live here's what we've got to pay in taxes. Trust me, I know what the tax bill is going to be for the new hospital tower. I don't want to raise taxes. Maybe if there was a way we could creatively come up with funding something like that, And then on the other side, it would be great to hear from city staff. I'm looking at Mr. Sims, but maybe he's not the person who's going to tell us. Maybe it's our CAO who will tell us. Like, what is the city actually already doing? Because I know they're doing a huge amount of work, but in my mind, that must fall into a lot of different seats at the table because it's such a big conversation. And maybe there's a way to amalgamate some of those pieces, get additional funding from another source that creates this piece. Because I'm thinking from what Bob had to say, like, this position isn't just about, you're right, creating shelter housing. It's about creating workforce housing. I mean, I have to tell you, the Port of Nanaimo has just gone through this whole process where we're looking to hire a new COO. We had over 30 applicants from everywhere in the world. Like, it was spectacular. I was so proud that everywhere in the world is watching Nanaimo. We actually had an applicant fly in from Abu Dhabi for a meeting. Like, and then where did they go? They went to look at housing, and the first thing I did was go, oh my goodness. They were going for somewhere to, like, if we have to relocate our whole family here, where are we going to live? And I'm like, I actually don't know the answer to that question, right? So it's all different levels of housing that's available, but there is so much to look at. As we develop this plan and we grow employment in our community, where we, you know, having someone even at this table who's talking about the housing, projecting what we're going to need, but looking at, you're right, government legislation. I can tell you right now, as a builder, the BC Building Code change to making 100% of all residential accessible is a massive deterrent, because as I learned from Darren, Bob's son, that means your land size doesn't change, your parking requirements are what they are, you only have so much massing, you're losing 10% of your units in every build. So yes, we need a housing director to be looking at that and then speaking to the provincial government saying, do you know what you're doing by making that a requirement? Do you actually know the impact you're having on this other huge issue? But we need someone to be actually coordinating and amalgamating that information for us. Hearing that people aren't, yes, and I'm keenly aware, people don't want to have carriage house. I mean, it's a different conversation if you're doing it to house family members, but I understand there's some guidelines around that. But bringing in a third party where you have no rights as a landlord, somebody's got to be speaking to that, or we're not going to be able to fix that problem of that we should be building carriage homes on our property to have other people live there, right? So I do believe that this position could have more than just, they should be advising and keeping us up to date on these things that are impediments to us to creating housing as well, because they do affect who we can't create a business that's going to take, we need to bring in 200 people to run that facility if there's nowhere for them to live. And so I do agree with that. And so I just would like us to look at it in a creative way, because I think we could create a unique position that might actually even get traction in other communities of our size as a concept plan. So that's my comments.
Thank you. Dave?
Sorry, maybe the words explore then at the front end of this, Bob? Explore the idea.
If I may.
Yeah, I think that makes good sense, Dave, but I do think, to Donna's point, we do need to look at some creative way to fund this, without question. But one of the things that strikes me, and likely others, is we're spending additional money this year to have community safety officers hired in order to deal with our homeless situation on the streets. What if we were to divert some of that funding and say, hey, this could be a starting point for funding this position? Because yes, in the short term, we would probably lose some security efforts in the community, but at least then we're addressing the long-term problem. That's how we house these people and start to make a difference. So I do think there's different areas where we can look at our existing expenditures as a city and see if we can't reallocate funds from those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to quickly speak to taking community safety officers. So we are grossly lacking bodies to fill the postings that we have. I can tell you at the hospital campus, we have very specific, when we call about a homeless issue, we have homeless issues every day because we are right next door to the largest drug dealer through, which is Island Health at the hospital. That's not my words, that's their words, is that, you know, they give drugs to people who come in with injury. We have specifically been told that there are no community safety officers to help those on the hospital campus, and that we must now engage the RCMP. So I would hesitate to take money from that fund when I feel, I don't know the conversation that's happening downtown. I can only speak to what's happening at the hospital campus. I would hesitate to take people from that, but I do think there are other areas that we could look at for certain, what that looks like, but I would just hesitate to take them from there.
What I think would be useful for everyone is, and because Bob has only met with Dale and myself, and I think it would be worthwhile, if we're going to talk about it here in a meaningful way, that we actually get Dale in, or Jeremy or somebody, to sort of explain what it is we're doing now. And, you know, are we just reinventing the wheel or giving a new name to something that's already happening that may be diversified somewhat within the structure of the city's public service? And will the creation or potential creation of a position like this make any real difference? Because as Donna's pointed out some of the practical stuff, I mean, I've been saying it a lot lately because we've had so many reactions from governments in the last few years, for that matter, to deal with what I call the current crisis, whatever it is, whatever is identified, with solutions that over the long haul create other problems down the road that may in fact be worse and don't really do much to solve the ongoing nature of the issues. I mean, we've always had housing issues in our society, and responses have been some more successful than others. And I think of my Uncle Cecil, who was in the Merchant Marine the whole of the Second World War, and bought his first house, him and his wife, on the VLA program, the Veterans Land Act. And we all know that, you know, that was all part of the longest period of fairly uninterrupted and growth and prosperity, and all of the things that helped build the country that, you know, certainly I can look around this table and say we've all benefited from enormously. That turned out to be good long-term policy. To go back to, you know, as Dave reminded us this morning, you know, in the 80s, they started cutting back on housing, and eventually the federal government to some almost got out of it entirely. Some provinces tried to struggle on, but that dealt with what was perceived to be the most important problem of the day, or helped deal with it, which was the whole issue of debt and deficit, which became the war cry of various politicians in this country, and it was very successful politically, and it drove the agenda. But as everyone around this table, and Dave as much as anyone because he's written about it, helped create the perfect storm we have now, where you layer in a mental health crisis, an opioid crisis, addiction, et cetera, and you don't have places for people to live, let alone people who don't need anything other than housing, who don't require seniors who simply can't afford the marketplace without enough seniors housing. For a year we built seniors housing in this country because that made sense. You came out of an era where the pension schemes that existed were parsimonious, is the kindest word I can say, and over time it took a long time to build up our pension scheme so that someone who did retire with their CPP could in fact manage to afford a house. And then and along the way we didn't pay any attention to the people making minimum wage who weren't going to end up with a large CPP and were more supplemented by old age security and then the supplement. But again, the housing costs creeped beyond their means. So all I'm saying is that there's a number of things that are being done that are beyond our control. And as Donna pointed out, one of them, I mean, with great respect, I mean, the city has an accessibility committee, for heaven's sakes. We're very serious about ensuring that this community is open to everybody. But every housing unit has to be built with the proposition that we're all going to end up in a wheelchair potentially, or walking with canes. I mean, it's absolutely insane. We don't build public housing for 100% of our population. We build it for the portion of our population that actually has the need. So there's an example. And as Bob pointed out, though, in his statement this morning, maybe that's what you need too, is somebody to be literally the advocate, the voice. So I'm intrigued by it. I think I'm with Dave. I like the concept of explore. I think, though, that we should probably have Dale and or someone from the city sit down with us at the next meeting and tell us exactly what it is we're doing. And they may well have suggestions about what we could do differently that may well lead to the creation of this position. So as I say, I'm not dismissing it out of hand, but as Donna pointed out, it's interesting. I tell a little story. I was accused of making a delegation of people complaining about the tax increases, particularly around the hospital tax the other day, of making them feel unsafe, which is a bit of a joke because, well, candidly, he's much bigger than me, and I don't think he felt particularly unsafe. One of our directors came to me afterwards, and this is the regional district, and said, how do they think I felt when there were about 100, 150 of them a few months ago, pounding on the wall of the meeting room, and this person is rather small in size. They said, how do they think I felt, if you want to talk about feeling unsafe? I mean, I point that out, put a little smile on your face, but also to point out that we literally had at the RDN, and for heaven's sakes, the biggest chunk of what we're asking for, and the board is looking at reducing the contribution. I mean, for years we didn't contribute to the hospital, and now we're having to do it, and it's the right thing, it's the long-term thing, it's the best thing. I think it's good public policy. But as Donna's noting, a lot of people out there are feeling very over anything that increases their cost of living, and particularly around taxation and government. Even though it's for something as important and as obvious and as central to our well-being as a new patient tower in a cath lab, is not getting the public support that it needs. So, as I say, I mean, I could dribble on all morning, so I'll try not to. But I think it's worth having Dale, as I say, or someone else come and talk to us about what we're doing, and then see if we want to take that on as a concept that we then pass a motion here at this table and say to council, we think this should be part of the ongoing budgetary process, and this position is worthwhile and would have benefit to the community. Keeping in mind, unfortunately, and I say this with a tiny note of cynicism, it is like everything we do at the city. We're not one of the two orders of government recognized under the Constitution. We can't control what the province and the feds do, and Lord knows I wish we could. I met with a group of Canadians yesterday of Chinese descent, and we were joking about, the power of the mayor. There's talk of a sister city relationship with the city in China, and laughing about the power of the mayor. And I said, I'd give anything to be a Chinese mayor, where I'd have real authority and ability to make things happen. But that's not the way our system works, and how much the municipal government can influence or drive the agenda for creating the kind of life that all of us want for ourselves and others is a challenge. Anyway, I'll shut up now. Anything further? Bob, please.
Just one last comment, if I may. So I think part of what we're starting to recognize surrounding this whole issue of a director of housing and other initiatives that might be similar, first of all, is that we are going to have to get the public on side. It's not something we can just say, hey, guess what? This is what we're doing. So I think a public campaign or certainly an informational campaign is going to be crucial to explaining why this is a useful thing to do. But the second thing I wanted to note is just going back to the great work that Dave has done in terms of trying to show the cost of homelessness and the fact that we're already spending this money dealing with the homeless situation that comes back to our community safety officers. If we don't have to look too many decades into the future to see that, there's a significant offset there, and we need to help our fellow citizens understand that. So I think a community information campaign is part and parcel of this if we do move forward. So thank you.
Someone sent me a note the other day complimenting me, and I don't get piles of compliments usually. It's something to the effect that, you know, I was stating what many would perceive to be an elitist position, but was stating in such a way that didn't tick people off. I'm summarizing what they had to say to me, but it's true. I mean, there is a resentment against elites now, and you're absolutely right. If it's just, quote, the mayor's leaders table and the city council saying this is good for you, there's a politics of resentment out there that says you guys, quote unquote, and it's mainly guys, I use that term advisedly, have messed things up pretty badly and we're not happy. So please don't be telling us what's good for us. We know what's good for us.
Right.
Mr. Sims.
Just, I had a couple of thoughts. One of them was that we did have quite a bit of discussion over a year ago, maybe on what sort of the whole picture was that the city was doing around housing. It was more the homelessness issues, but you could go back to your previous minutes to have, or those agendas to have a look at some of those presentations, but that's not, I don't think it's saying the same thing that you're saying, Bob, which is really sort of it strikes me, Your Worship, as a bit of a political position, this Director of Housing, and I don't know how the conversation went, but I just think, I always get nervous when we're having a political body recommend an operational position, and just that's just putting that out there, and that's only my thought. And without putting Councillor Joseph on the spot, I think the Nation does some housing works, and I don't know if it looks like she's talking to somebody, but I thought she may have some input on that as well.
Councillor Joseph. Councillor Joseph,
Yes.
please. Thank
Can
you.
you guys hear me?
Yes, beautifully, actually.
Sorry, I was multitasking there, Bill. My apologies. Would you mind restating your statement?
Of course. Sorry to catch you unawares.
No worries.
Without putting you on the spot, Councillor, I just wonder, I know the Nation does quite a bit with housing on
Yes.
various reserves, and I wonder if you have a comment on this concept of having a housing czar or housing guru within your political structure. Thank you.
For sure. At this table, certainly look to your council at the end of the day, Mayor. But if CNEMOC had a voice here in this process on your decision making internally, housing is such a hard nut to crack. With CNEMOC, I think we all know that. From CNEMOC, from a government perspective, it requires a substantial, meaningful amount of resources to try and see some change in our lifetime, and to try and amend some of the structures that we've inherited for CNEMOC. That is Section 9124 of the Constitution, the CMHC over the last 60 years, and other policy initiatives that are historical in nature but have had a long-term impact on our community. I was just looking at the statistics that Council has been reviewing for the last little while, and over the last 60 years, we've recorded 220 dwellings only on reserve, 654 acres on reserve. 88.5% of that is single family, so one lot, one house. 11% of that is multifamily. So we're experiencing a serious bottleneck to be able to provide access to housing to only 40% of our members on reserve. We have 60% who are off reserve. We currently have 274 members on the wait list that have been waiting for a long time to access housing. So by these standards, to satisfy that, provide access to housing to our people, that would take 72 years. That's only for the list right now. That's not even taking into consideration population growth. In the last 6 years, we've grown by 6.5%. And our median household income too is only $40,000. Our individual income is average is $12,000 to $27,000. So these are the statistics that we grapple with. Our nation is generally 6 times behind everyone else. So an aggressive plan to catch up to everybody, to renovate or replace major housing issues to the tune of 60%, would take us roughly about 156 million. That's repairing or replacing houses, but also depositing new housing into our community. And if we were to do that in 11 years, we would have a fighting chance to catch up to everybody. Now, separately from that comment, going to your question, Bill, yeah, we are trying to crack some solutions, and it's a multi-pronged approach. One with BC Housing, we signed the MOU a couple of years ago. In there, we have multiple properties that we're working with the city on to develop, whether it be affordable housing, supportive housing, social housing, youth housing, all kinds of distributions there. But we're actively working with the city under that MOU with BC Housing. It's more of a medium-term approach as opposed to an immediate result, I guess, so to speak. But certainly our engines are behind that. Separate from that, we also have Petroglyph Development Group, who is working on phase 1 of B&D development. Now, we partner with VIU to look at a land use concept and also preliminary feasibility ideas. And we're looking north of 5,000 units up there for the whole property, the whole 200 acres, maybe more, who knows, but requires major infrastructure. However, phase 1, we would like to get that going, shovels in the ground within the next 5 years. That's D&D phase 1, Wakeside and 5th Street at the corner there. Swaycom, 1 Terminal Avenue, we're hoping to move on phase 1 there too. Get the building down, deal with all the asbestos, deal with everything, demolish the building. We're hopeful to get that done before the end of this year and start on phase 1 to get some units up there in the next couple of years as well. There's other opportunities we're trying to work on with other partners in Nanaimo as well. But if the city was to move on hiring this housing czar, as you say, certainly we would try and look for an integrated partnership on a staff level, administrative level, so we could keep having this conversation and see where it ends up to be mutually supportive between Sodema and the city.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, friends. So let's get Dale here next meeting, if that's okay. And hopefully some useful, and maybe be able to send around some useful information. And just on a personal note to Dave, I was going to say, I'm going to email you and Christy Wood this morning. And just, there's some good news with the Heart and Hearth program and the 2 units going in the south end. It should give you some comfort that advocacy has not gone unrewarded or unnoted.
I know those units, PDDN, right?
Good. Anything further? The next meeting date would be Friday, May the 16th. All right? Mm-hmm. If there's nothing further, motion to adjourn. Move Mr. Whitty, second Mr. Moss. All in favor? Thank you very much.